Hi Apple lovers and welcome to the Tech Hub and my latest Apple Budget Buy series episode where I review old Apple tech which is still usable and affordable today. This episode looks at the iPad Pro 12.9-inch, first generation, which was released a decade ago in 2015. Is it still worth it in 2025? Let's find out. Let's start the episode. Okay, so let me give you my initial thoughts on the iPad Pro series. I mean, it's iconic. It took the iPad from just an everyday tablet to a Pro time, and this was the first time Apple tried to start competing with laptops and things like that, which we'll look at as we go through the episode today. Now, my personal history with the iPad Pro, I didn't really have any until, where are we at? Probably the 11-inch third generation. So when the M1 came in, I always kind of went from iPads to then iPad Airs. So it's only recently that I had the Pros, and yes, I do have the new M4 Pro. But I remember these coming along at the time. Now, one thing that was always appealing to me was the screen size of this 12.9. I mean, the body is bigger than 12.9. That's the screen here. I just love it for the size. Now, I remember my drum teacher had one when I used to do drum lessons. And in the end, I got one as a tablet for my wall by my drum kit, which was a great use for it. But apart from that, I didn't really have a use case until recently when I did get the new iPad Pro. I did get a 13-inch because I wanted the larger display due to my display behind you. I wanted it as an external. However, that changed and I went down to the 11-inch. But there's something about the 12.9 body which I absolutely love. Now, I'd like to say I got this just for this episode, but I've wanted a 12.9 version for a while just to have that option of a big display if I need it. I've set it up. I do intend to use it. If I don't use it, I will probably end up selling it, but I absolutely love this body. So let's delve into the history of this iconic device. The iPad Pro 12.9-inch first generation was Apple's first ever iPad Pro, making a major step toward the iPad lineup. It was designed to be more powerful, professional-grade tablet aimed at creatives, professionals, and power users. Here's a full breakdown of its history. It all started back on September the 9th, 2015, when Apple announced something completely new. An iPad that was bigger, more powerful, and aimed at professionals. A few months later, on November the 11th, 2015, the first iPad Pro 12.9-inch officially launched, and it was unlike anything we'd seen before. For starters, this display was massive, 12.9 inches with a resolution of 2732 by 2048, making it the sharpest iPad screen at the time. But the real power came from the A9X chip, a beast of a processor that was nearly twice as fast as previous iPads. Apple wasn't just making a bigger iPad, they were turning it into a true laptop alternative, and they did that with three big changes. Number one, the Apple Pencil. This was the first iPad to support the Apple Pencil, bringing precision drawing and note-taking to iOS. It had a low latency and felt incredibly smooth to use. Number two, the Smart Connector. Yes, those three dots at the bottom. Apple also introduced the Smart Keyboard, a detachable keyboard that connected magnetically, something we now take for granted on the iPad lineup. And three, quad speaker audio. This was the first iPad with 4 speakers, adjusting sound based on how you held the device. A small detail, but a game changer for media consumptions. But here's where things got interesting. iOS was holding it back. Even when its powerful hardware, the iPad Pro 12.9-inch first gen was still running iOS 9. So this is pre-iPadOS, which wasn't fully optimized for a pro-level device. There was no proper file management, no desktop class multitasking, and no trackpad support. So, where the hardware was ahead of its time, the software took years to catch up. Luckily, with updates over the years, this iPad eventually got features like iPadOS, split screen, multitasking, and even Apple Pencil improvements. But at launch, it felt like it was waiting for the future. And it really felt like the first time that Apple's hardware and software just wasn't on a par, and those departments weren't talking to each other. It was a real shame. If they had developed iPadOS back then, just think how more advanced it would be today. The first gen iPad Pro 12.9 inch was officially discontinued in June 2017, replaced by the second gen iPad Pro with a ProMotion 120Hz display with the A10X Fusion chip. But even though it's long gone, this iPad changed everything. It paved the way for today's M series iPads, pushed Apple to develop iPadOS, and proved that an iPad could be a more powerful productivity tool, not just a bigger iPhone. Now let's take a look at the specifications. Now let's break down all the specs that made this iPad ahead of its time, from its massive display to the powerful A9X chip. Let's dive in. Let's start with the basics. The iPad Pro 12.9 inch first gen was announced on September the 9th, 2015 and officially launched on November the 11th, 2015. It was discontinued in June 2017, replaced by the second gen iPad Pro. But even today, it still holds up in many ways. Now, the display was one of the biggest selling points. Literally, it had a 12.9 inch Retina display, resolution of 2732 by 2048 pixels, giving you 264 pixels per inch. That meant sharp visuals, great color accuracy, and an excellent viewing experience. Brightness 600 nits, so outdoor visibility was decent at the time, and of course it was fully laminated, reducing glare and making content pop. But here's the catch: no ProMotion. That smooth 120Hz refresh rate didn't arrive until any Apple device and the iPad Pro till 2017. Under the hood, Apple packed in the A9X chip, which was a 64-bit powerhouse. It had dual-core 2.26 GHz CPU and a 12-core PowerVR GPU, making it twice as fast as the iPad Air 2. And for the first time in an iPad, 4 gigs of RAM. That might not sound like much today, but back in 2015, this was a huge deal. It meant smoother multitasking and better performance for pro-level apps like Adobe Photoshop and GarageBand. However, at the time, those pro apps really weren't here, and we didn't even have iPadOS. So the software just did not take advantage of the hardware. And that's still the argument today, isn't it? Now let's talk about storage. So Apple gave us three options: 32 gigabytes, which is Wi-Fi only, 128 gigabytes, which is Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi with cellular, and 256 gigabytes, which was Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi with cellular. But there was a catch: no expandable storage. So once you picked a size, that was it. And it's always been that way with iPads and iPhones. Now cameras, on the iPad Pro, not really its main focus, but here's what it's got. So the rear camera is an 8 megapixel iSight camera. It records at 1080p HD video, recording at 30 frames per second. It does, however, manage to do slow-mo at 120 frames per second. Now for the front camera, for your FaceTime calls, it has a 1.2 megabyte FaceTime HD camera and 720p HD video. It was good enough for FaceTime and quick photos, but let's be real, no one's using a 12.9-inch iPad as their main camera, and they shouldn't be. However, for a quick document capture, it was okay. Now, this was the first iPad to feature a quad speaker system, 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. It adjusted sound based on how you held the device, and honestly, it made a huge difference. And of course, Apple introduced 2 major accessories with this iPad. First of all, of course, the Apple Pencil, first generation, great for precision drawing, note-taking and pro-level art apps. The Smart Keyboard, a magnetic foldable keyboard that used the new Smart connector. These might be standard now, but in 2015, this was a whole new way of using the iPad. And that's when they started trying to be more than a tablet. Which ironically is one of the reasons I love the iPad mini, because it is still just a tablet and you don't have these options for a keyboard or anything else. Battery life, Apple promised 10 hours. In real world use, it mostly held up even with that massive display, but because it had a bigger body, it has a bigger battery. But the real question is, did it stand the test of time? Well, the iPad Pro 12.9-inch first generation was supported all the way to iPadOS 16, which means Apple kept it alive for nearly 8 years. Not bad at all. So what are the uses today? So as I already stated, I am planning to use this since I got rid of the 13-inch iPad Pro M4. I have missed a bigger display. I plan to use it for content. I mean, that's the only reason to have such a big display. Now, as for what works on it, anything that works on iPadOS 16. And I was surprised actually, the apps I downloaded, what did I download? Disney Plus, Netflix, all the streaming apps, social media. Just like on macOS, when I went to download an app, it said it's downloading a version that works on iPadOS 16. I didn't know that was a thing, so I've learned something there. So it's not a guarantee there's a iPadOS 16 for all the apps you want to use. It still works as a web browser. You can still transfer your content from your Mac to it. So for music, for TV shows, for movies. I use Plex, so it's fine as a Plex server. Sorry, a Plex viewer, not a server. It works. However, it's 10 years old. The batteries are terrible. This one, I haven't put it through a big use case, but I don't expect to get more than 2 hours out of it. And that's fine. I'm not looking to use it all day. But be realistic at this point. The batteries are 10 years old. So pricing, of course, you can't get it direct from Apple. I can't see any on Amazon. So we're going to talk about eBay and the secondhand market, which is what I focus on anyway. For the 12.9-inch version, base model, around about £100. They still go for a tidy penny. I mean, like I said, don't expect good batteries at this point. That's a given. However, the one I got, the screen is pretty much immaculate. I can't see any scratches on it. There's a few dings and scrapes on the body, but ultimately it's good. But you should always be buying screen protectors at this point anyway. So as soon as I got it, I had a screen protector ready to go. I've got a case that'll work with it. Don't spend 50 quid on a case. Just get a cheap £10 one so you do protect that body. Hey, it still works, and for £100, it's not a bad option. And like I said, if you got a setup like this, and now I might even use it as a external display when I'm out and about on my MacBook, because I can use it, and a sidecar works, so it's compatible with macOS. You can use it as an external display. It was a bit flaky on the wireless for that, so you could always wire it in or use something like Duet for using it as a monitor. So it had its use out in the field as well. So I think for £100 to £150, depending on the Wi-Fi connection, cellular or storage capacity, it's not a bad laptop. So what do you think? Was the first iPad Pro a game changer, or was it held back by its software? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, please be kind. You can follow me on Instagram and Threads at TechHubWilts.uk. Also, please check out my website, which is www.techhubwilts.co.uk. Please like this video, please subscribe to me, and I'll see you on the next episode.